The soldiers were very kind to me and explained that it wasn't too bad just to do as they did. But it was still caused me a great deal of apprehension. And when I heard the first shot, I remember thinking it's just like it is on television, straight out of the movies. After that, there wasn't much to it, except that I had a very good commander with me, a Vietnamese commander, who had told me before, do as the soldiers do, and I learned that very quickly. When they went down, I went down quickly without thinking about it. I trod in their footsteps. When they ran forward, I ran forward because it's just as dangerous to run back. But I knew later how green I was and how inexperienced, and how I was very lucky to survive the first few times, maybe even the first year or two in combat.
When you say you don't go back, why don't you go back?
Well, it's dangerous to go back alone, because in guerrilla warfare, the opposition, the guerrillas in this case, often make it a point to cut off the troops that are advancing. It's a standard thing, cut them off and destroy them if you're good enough. So that it was very, very dangerous to retreat. In any case, during the first years of combat for me, it was in Vietnam, and it was usually a long, long way out, and there was no way back. You're with them until to the end.
Can you explain that, even though it seems not the case, why it's more practical to often go forward and towards a fire?
Yes, well, I always liked to be in the immediate front line. If I was going to be there at all, I wanted to be in the immediate front line where the advancing infantry were, because I believed and quickly saw that it was equally dangerous, maybe more dangerous, to be in the second line, that is 100 metres or 200 metres behind the front line, because that's where the rockets and the mortars and propelled grenades would explode, because they're trying to hit the commander's company, the commander's section. That was the important thing to knock out. And when shells are exploding, that's very, very dangerous, with thousands of pieces of shrapnel, tiny pieces of metal, flying everywhere. I don't like that at all. I prefer the bullets, because at least if you take immediate cover to your immediate front, that's the only thing to worry about. You don't have to worry about things dropping on top of you or around you. So, whilst I know a lot of people, particularly in later years, when I always went forward with the advancing troops, thought I was foolish. I even heard the words death wish used. That wasn't it at all. If I was going to cover, I wanted to be in the best place to film and the safest. And for my way of thinking, the immediate front line was the safest.
Can you explain why people don't like shrapnel? They prefer bullets?
I don't know what other people like. I know what I don't like the shrapnel, because you can be killed by any one of 1,000, 10,000 pieces of metal from one shell. Slivers of metal which drive straight through you and kill you.
How far effective is the range of shrapnel?
The effective range is anything up to 100 metres, depending on the shell, depending on the weapon that's being used against you.
Where is the safest place to stay?
Safest place to stay, from my point of view anyway, is the immediate front line, with the front line of the advancing troops. Yes. Maybe we could cut it there.
Okay.
Yep. Cut it.
Rolling. Slate 3. Can you tell me why you try and get forward to an embankment?
Well, you go forward to any indentation or embankment which is going to give you protection. You only need that much, you know, or maybe a little, if you're a little bit fatter, you need that much. But for protection from bullets. And unless the opposition fire is very, very accurate, that is, mortar shells landing right on top of you, well, you're safe from everything except bullets. And
how do
so
you
that's
get there?
right. Well, you've got to go forward with the troops. And when you're committed to that, you must go forward with them, because you're in much greater danger to be left back, straddled somewhere in between a rear position and the front line. They go forward. Well, it varies from army to army, unit to unit, but in general terms they leapfrog. That is, half of the troops, approximately, or maybe 2/3 of them, will lay down a hail of fire while a third to a half go forward. Then the front line, the troops that have gone forward become the front line. They keep the head of the opposition down in turn while the rest come up in 1 or 2 lots, and in that manner they go forward. But it varies, you know. It very quickly can become to within grenade throwing distance, which is maybe 10 meters, 10 yards.
From the enemy?
From the enemy, from the opposition.
Otherwise, if you're not running forward, how else do you get forward to cover?
Well, you only walk or run or crawl. Sometimes you go forward by crawling, but every situation changes. If you're in a village with lots of trees, for instance, you're flitting from tree to tree. You're taking whatever cover that is available, and it may be a house, or it may be a tree, or it may be a little indentation in the ground, or it may be just the fact that you go flat on the ground, because that in itself is a measure of protection. But don't stand up like that, and you're a big target.
Can you sometimes be left out in the open like that for...
Yes, you can be left out very clearly, left very easily stranded out in the open, and then there's nothing to do except forward or back, according to what the troops are doing, whilst keeping on the ground. Sometimes you must roll over and over. It's very dangerous because of the shells landing. Invariably when you're caught in that position, the opposition will lay down a barrage of mortar or artillery, whatever they have.
Can you tell me something about reaction times and getting it down to a fine art?
Yes, well I knew about reaction times because I was some sort of runner before, so I knew that from the time the mind assesses a situation and gives the order to the limbs to move is something like a quarter of a second, 3/16 to 4/16 of a second, even 5/16. And that's a lot of time when bullets are flying around. So the thing that I realized was that react immediately, take cover immediately, hit the ground. That's the first cover. Don't run to the nearest tree because you're dead. Hit the ground immediately, then think maybe you can get to the nearest tree. And because of that reaction time, you've already lost a quarter of a second anyway. So you've got to realize that luck plays some part in it, because there's a quarter of a second at least over which you have no control. And
can you give me an example where luck works?
Yeah, luck comes into it to a certain extent. I don't think that it's like 90% luck. I think it's 90% experience and reacting in a positive way that you know will safeguard you as much as possible. Maybe 10% luck, or maybe even less. But one example is very early, maybe in 1966, 67, when I was in Vietnam. I was in the southern part, open paddy fields with just a few tussocks and bushes, you know. And suddenly there had been no immediate combat. Viet Cong jumped up 5 or 6 or 8 feet in front of us from behind a small bush, took aim and shot dead the radio operator. The least, not from his way of thinking, but actually the least important member of a group of about 5. There was a battalion commander, and it was his radio operator. And there was an American advisor, and there was me, and I must have looked like an American advisor. And there was a deputy commander, or his adjutant or something. He shot the radio operator. Maybe he thought because of the equipment he carried was very important, made him an important man. But that's luck. It could have been any one of the 5.
Did he live to tell the story?
He didn't. The marksman didn't live to tell the story. Of course, he was dead almost as quickly as the radio operator.
Is combat the same 2 times running?
I don't think it's ever the same 2 times running. Like when you cross the street, it's not exactly the same 2 times running. It's the same street. There's roughly the same cars, but they're doing slightly different speed all the time. Things are happening at a slightly